And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. Welcome to Benchley Night. Welcome to Benchley Night. It's getting into the middle of August already. How the hell did that happen? It was just July, and before that was just June. Before that, spring was just on the way. So it goes. So it goes. Well, welcome. Tonight's liberal snowplowing do-gooder beneficiary, as you may know, is the Freedom of the Press Foundation, because I assume many of you have read about the rather horrifying abuse of police power out in Kansas this last week. The forces of darkness now appear to feel comfortable raiding the press and confiscating computers and cell phones, and it's really terrifying. So anyway, we decided that we would do a fundraiser for the Freedom of the Press Foundation, because they're working with the Marion, Kansas newspaper to bring lawsuit against the abuse of power. And unfortunately, this morning, the Facebook thing that allows you to create a fundraiser was not working, and then it decided that I was possibly at fault. It said you're abusing the fundraising function because you're using it too fast, so you're temporarily blocked. So I got blocked. Anyway, we still manage people donated directly to the Liberal Snowplowing Do-Gooder Fund, which is my PayPal account. Or if you Venmo, you can Venmo me at Charlie-Hunter-15, numeral 15. And all funds collected this week are going to the Freedom of the Press Foundation. We raised a little over $150, which is not bad, not bad. And we have a few people to thank. I've got Charbonneau asleep over on my left here. He may all of a sudden come back to life. Oh, he's sleeping on a stapler. That is so comfortable. You gotta put some really hard objects underneath him, and then he finds it very, very easy to sleep. It's like the Princess and the Pea. Anyway, a few people to thank, as ever, my neighbor to the west, the wonderful Martha Rowley, who stops by with a check in a little envelope that says do-gooder. Thank you, Martha Rowley. Out there on the high seas, ladies and gentlemen, on the high seas, I believe she's on a transatlantic ship going from England back to the U.S., the peripatetic Terry Hudson. My artist friend and excellent human being, Miss Catherine Fisher. Miss Sharon Wagner. Mr. John Wilhelm out there in Omaha, Nebraska. The great Carol Fulkerson in Fulton, Missouri, keeping track of all those sheep. Thank you, Carol. My brother, up there in Wethersfield, Vermont, or Cavendish, Vermont. Thank you, Will Hunter. Thank you. And out there in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Out there in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where the corn grows high. Where the corn grows high, ladies and gentlemen, but not as high as my very, 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 very tall cousin, Mr. Nat Hunter, his wonderful wife Elise, and their little dog Ginger. Thank you. All right, well, it is time to continue the Life Polar Expedition. If you remember, ladies and gentlemen, we have been reading Robert Benchley's dispatches from the trip he attempted to make to the North Pole at the same time as Amundsen and Peary and Byrd and all those people. And unlike some of them, he is going by bicycle. He and Lieutenant Commander Connolly and Ensign Thermaline are going by bicycle, and they've made it from New York City as far as somewhere in Westchester, if I do recollect correctly. Oh, to the Benchley home. They're at the Benchley home. And they're going to add, if you remember, they've decided that it's necessary to have a small child along to issue reports, because some of the other expeditions have been doing that. And so they are drafting little Bobby, little Robert Benchley Jr. Now, Nathaniel is the one who went on to write Jaws, right? I don't know what little Bobby Jr. went on to do. Special North Pole correspondence from Bobby Benchley, juvenile member of Life's bicycle expedition en route to the pole. North White Plains, New York. When we left Scarsdale on the second dash to the pole, my father told me that he'd write the account of our trip and that I should just sign my name to it, as every expedition has to have a little boy along who writes a book about it later. You write it and I sign it? I asked him. That's right, Bobby, he said. Daddy writes it, Bobby signs it, and Bobby gets all the publicity. Publicity my eye, I said. If I sign it, I write it. I'll take no responsibility for your drivel. I know your stuff, and I prefer to write my own, if you don't mind. The rest of the school would kid the pants off of me if one of your books came out with my name signed on it. This angered my father, and he made as if to hit me, but I ducked, and I ran into the house. All right for you, you big bully, I yelled out at him. Just for that, I won't go on your old expedition. Well, this sobered him up, and he agreed to let me write my own stuff and sign it and take 10% of the royalties. If this book sells as it ought to, with any kind of pushing at all from the publishers, I ought to clean up. So here we are as far as North White Plains. And very dull it has been up till now, too. We left Scarsdale at 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning. I, on my new Demon, with special coaster brake attachment and a swell cap with a big visor on it to keep the Arctic sun out of my eyes. It is the Arctic sun out of my eyes. It is my private opinion that all the Arctic sun we see on this trip you could put in my right eye and I'd never even notice it. Proofreading note by Benchley Sr. I told Bobby he ought to let me write out a rough draft for him first. You see what he's done with the word Arctic? However, if he's going to be just stubborn about the thing. The trouble with the expedition so far is that my father and Lieutenant Commander Connolly get winded so soon. They can't pump up even a little hill without having to get off at the top and rest. We're lucky to be in North White Plains, let alone the North Pole. I began by going on ahead as fast as I could, but this just made them sore. And I lost them going through Hartsdale, and I had to sit down by the roadside and wait for them to catch up. They both got pretty fat during the summer, hanging around at the base in Scarsdale. And my father especially has got to look out, or he'll look something awful in another year. I told him so, too. And he told me to shut up or else he'd send me away to military school. Well, anyway, what with the old folks puffing along behind and Ensign Thermaline having to stop off in White Plains to see some old girl it has taken us 4 days to get just this far. Coming through White Plains, my father tried to tell me about the battle that was fought there during the Revolutionary War. Well, what battle was that? I asked. The Battle of White Plains, of course, he said. What did you think it was? The Battle of Princeton, New Jersey? Well, Princeton beat Harvard, didn't they? I came back at him. At this, he made a lunge for me and fell off his bicycle, which got me to laughing so hard I had to stop too. And who won the Battle of White Plains, Father dear? I asked him, trying to change the subject. The Americans did, of course, he said, brushing himself off. Yeah, I said. So the Americans won, did they? Well, that shows what you know about it. The British won. We had it in school just last week. What school? Asked my father, very sore now. Not Harvard, anyway, I said. Yale beat Harvard, too. Yeah, he said, getting redder and redder. Yale beat Harvard by playing 12 men against Harvard's 11. And if you aren't a better boy, Daddy is going to send you right back to Scarsdale on the 410 from White Plains. The 410 doesn't stop in Scarsdale, I said. It's an express to 125th Street. Well, let's be getting on, interrupted Lieutenant Commander Connolly. This is no way to get to the North Pole, arguing about Harvard and Yale. So we all got on our bicycles again and we pushed ahead. But I think I'll drop off at Mount Kisco and see the Barry kids. My time is worth something. And one more dispatch from the Life Polar Expedition, ladies and gentlemen. Continuation of the log of Bobby Benchley, juvenile yeoman on Life's North Pole Expedition. Mount Kisco, New York, en route to North Pole by bicycle. Things have been going from bad to worse in this expedition, and I doubt very much if I can stick it out any longer. My father has been unbearable ever since we left North White Plains, harping continually on the fact that I am only 7 years old, and I am small for my age at that. If parents only knew it, it is that sort of talk which makes for radicalism and debauchery in the younger generation. Then he began insisting that I mention the names of firms which have contributed stuff for our expedition. When I say that we stopped at the roadside for lunch, I must add, quote, which was so kindly contributed by the Alexander Hamilton Peanut Butter Sandwich Company of 1145 North Rumsey Street, Chicago, Illinois. Or if I mention tipping our hats to a lady, acknowledgement of it must be given to the Bon Ton Arctic Hat Company, who were generous enough to supply the expedition with hats. Now, this is a lot of hooey, and I told my father so, and I refused point blank to lend myself to any such cheap advertising as that. It was then that he brought up the point that I was only 7, and that I should busy myself with only those things which a 7-year-old boy should have. And he added furthermore that I could keep a civil tongue in my head. So I have determined to stop off here at Mount Kisco and spend a week or so with the Barry kids, and then go back home to Scarsdale. This expedition is never going to get to the North Pole anyway. My father and Lieutenant Commander Connolly are too fat, especially my father. You ought to see him. Insert in log made by Benchley Sr. Bobby has proven quite a disappointment to us so far, and I am not sure that I would be sorry to see him leave the expedition here. Our idea in having him along was to give the boy a little publicity and to have him write a book which could be sold to the juvenile trade around Christmas time. But a little boy who behaves as badly as he does not deserve any publicity, and he can't write for a darn anyway. Furthermore, I am not getting fat. I always put on a little weight in the winter because I can't play tennis, but everyone says that it is becoming to me. I weigh only 180 when I am ready for my cold bath, which I very seldom am these mornings. And for a man of my height, that is not a pound too much. As a matter of fact, Bobby is probably a little sore because he's so small for his age. You'd never think he was 7. He looks more like a child of 3. He must get that from his mother's side of the family, because all the Benchleys have shot right up to a good height before they were 7. His older brother, Nat, is a fine, tall boy, and a great deal smarter in school than little Bobby. Then, too, another sign that I am not fat is that people who haven't seen me for several years all remark, "How well you look." You don't say that to a man who is too fat, do you? But there is no reason for having our expedition torn with dissension just because a little boy has no respect for his father. I suggested sending him back to Scarsdale, but Lieutenant Commander Connolly said, why not give him another chance? He is so cute. It is all very well for an outsider to call a child cute, but when a man has reached my age, he is entitled to a little respect from his own children, it seems to me. Resumption of the log by Bobby. It is very nice here at Mount Kisco at the Barrys, and I wouldn't be surprised if the whole expedition stayed here until the snow gets out of the roads. Mr. Barry has some very good stuff that he brought from France last year, and I heard my father say last night that he wouldn't care if he never saw the North Pole, or anything else for that matter. He and Lieutenant Commander Connolly think they are pretty good at 2-part singing, and as Lieutenant Commander Connolly said, well, it looks as if it were going to be a fine winter for 2-part singing, especially Sleep, Kentucky Babe. Mr. Barry hasn't said anything yet, except that he has to take his family to Cannes early in March. All he expected us to do was to stop here overnight. And while he's very nice about it, I guess he knows what he's in for, all right. On the way up from North White Plains, I saw a snowbird, but I did not say anything about it, as I knew it would mean taking out pencils and making notes for the museum. A hot lot of good the museum is going to get out of this expedition. And it is 8:03. Let's have the final installment. Ladies and gentlemen. Let me see how long it is. Don't want to bore you all. 1 page, 2 pages. Oh yeah, we can do this. Mount Kisco, New York, January 21st. At a meeting of the older members of the expedition last night, it was voted to ask Bobby for his resignation, not in any spirit of anger, but simply because it was felt that he was not in sympathy with the aims and policies of those in command. Lieutenant Commander Connolly was elected to inform Bobby and to see that he got his car fare back to Scarsdale. Bobby had anticipated our action, however, by resigning on his own hook and was already on his way home with one of the Barry children in the Barry's car, leaving a note to the effect that he was pretty tired of the whole thing and doubted whether the expedition would reach the pole at all because of having so many overweight men in it. And so ends the first really unfortunate episode of our trip. As Bobby grows older, he probably will acquire more repression and will learn that individual whims must sometimes give way to the common good. I also hope that he starts growing tall pretty soon. With the discordant element out of the way, the next thing to do was to plan for our hop-off. We still have quite a distance to go before we even get in sight of the pole, and we must be moving. So a meeting was called in the Barry study, to which Mr. Barry was ex officio invited, as it was thought that he might have some suggestions. His very first suggestion was excellent. It was, in part, to concoct an eggnog, a hot eggnog. He had some very good eggs, he said, and added that this was one of the advantages of living in the country. You get good eggs. This was voted on. It was decided that Mr. Barry was right. So the eggnog was made hot, and the meeting was called to order. Lieutenant Commander Connolly said we ought to decide how we were to overcome the retarding action of deep snow upon the wheels of our bicycles. We had made several trial spins around the house here, just to see that our bicycles are in good order, and found A, that they were not, and B, that even if they had been, the snow would have made any kind of progress at all extremely difficult. As Lieutenant Commander Connolly said, it's almost as if someone were actually holding the wheels back. From there, the discussion got around to cases in which wheels actually had been held back by some unseen force, but nobody had ever heard of such cases. Ensign Thermaline said that he knew of a case once where a man with a hypnotic power had put a friend under a spell and made it impossible for him to move his hand away from his face. Mr. Barry asked whose face it was the man. Mr. Barry asked whose face it was the man's hand was on, his own or the hypnotizer's. And Ensign Thermaline said he had never thought to inquire, but he could get the man on the telephone in a jiffy and find out. We all said it would be interesting to know. So a telephone book was sent for, and Ensign Thermaline set about looking up his friend's number. While this was going on, we got back to the business of the expedition and the question of when we should start on. Our route lies pretty fairly straight ahead of us, on up through Westchester County to Massachusetts, then on up through New Hampshire to Canada, and from there to the pole. It ought to be very pretty around Williamstown at this time of year, said Lieutenant Commander Connolly. That's where Williams College is. Everyone agreed to this, and it was remembered that Williams' song, The Royal Purple, has some very neat harmony in it. Furthermore, it was discovered that Mr. Barry sings a very passable baritone, and a baritone is the one thing that our expedition has lacked. For Lieutenant Commander Connolly twists out a very tricky tenor, and with me leading and Ensign Thermaline on a low but fairly accurate bass, it began to look as if we might do something worthwhile after all. Well, here's a funny thing, spoke up Ensign Thermaline, still buried in the telephone book. There are two people by the name of Gepp, both living in Jersey City. A Ben F. Gepp at 218 Belvedere Avenue and a William A. Gepp at 82 Jewett Avenue. Probably brothers, suggested Mr. Barry. Well, not necessarily, retorted Lieutenant Commander Connolly a little testily. All right, cousins then, said Mr. Barry, and the threatened hard feeling was avoided. Mr. Barry would be a very good man to have come along with us to the pole, as he is very conciliatory and diplomatic, and after Bobby, we need someone like that. As a matter of fact, I suggested to him that he come with us, and he said he really ought to take his family to Cannes in March, as he had promised them. But he added that he was almost persuaded to give that plan up and come along with us. I suggest that we go right then and sound out Mrs. Barry on the subject, because I was sure that we could make her see the thing in the right light. So we all went upstairs to look for Mrs. Barry, but she was asleep. Lieutenant Commander Connolly suggested a little serenade on the ground that married women get little or no romance in their lives, and said that if he knew married women at all, Mrs. Barry would be very glad have a serenade sung outside her door, asleep or not. So we did the royal purple for her, very soft the first time through, and then a crescendo on the repeat. Then, at Mrs. Barry's suggestion, we went to bed. All right, ladies and gentlemen, all right. I think this may conclude the Life Polar Expedition. It certainly concludes this volume of Robert Benchley's called The Early Worm. And it does conclude tonight's Benchley night. So you take good care. You keep fighting for a free press. Maybe we should all subscribe to the Marion County Courier or whatever its name is. I don't know. But take good care, and we'll see you next week. Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.